the Chinese aren't recognizing our securities, and the securities are ultimately controlled, and the protocols of the securities are controlled by a management team, and the management team is subject to the influence of a family or a founder. Or if you're the CEO of a company, then there's any number of politicians that can hold a gun to your head. The mayor of the town you're in can coerce you. The neighborhood association can coerce you. The county can coerce you. The state can coerce you. The federal government coerce you. 187 regulatory agencies can coerce you. Mm-hmm. So to the extent that you have anything where you've got an influencer, like that they have influence on it, we can make changes if we see fit. That's the kiss of death for a commodity. The fact that you can change it. And I think that most of the problems in the world are well-intentioned people changing things. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the problem. The fact that you can change it is what corrupts it. Right? It's literally, what's the difference between the definition of change and the definition of corrupt? Like what? When do you corrupt something and not change it? Right? I mean, the truth is, for example, let's take another commodity like steel. Okay, you can change it any way you want. Go ahead. How would you like to change it? I put you in charge. You're the CEO of steel. Okay, now that you're the CTO of steel, Preston, we need you to invalidate steel's tensile strength in Russia because we're fighting a war.
Yeah.
It's your patriotic duty. Okay, did you change it? Did you improve it? Did you corrupt it? How about just... The difference between, why is steel a commodity and why is iron a commodity? Well, because when they figured out how to create steel, the recipe was released into the universe and they couldn't take it back. You see? Mm-hmm. The creation, you can create a commodity. Bronze is an alloy. Right, it's a creation, and you could argue bronze is a commodity, but it's a one-way function. You created it, you released it, and your worst enemy can build a sword of it and kill you with it. That's how you know it's a commodity and it's not a security. Lord knows, if it was a coupon for a bronze sword and I came at you, you would revoke my coupon. Mm-hmm. Like, Preston, here's a coupon for a Glock. Can you give me the Glock? I'm going to shoot you in the head with it. I don't think you're redeeming the coupon, right? And so fundamentally, I don't think there's a difference between being able to change something and being able to corrupt something. And that's why it's very dangerous to actually take this idealistic notion that we're on a journey, to keep building in the protocol.
So, Michael, people will say, I hear this all the time. People will say, Bitcoin just costs too much energy expense. It's too much. And like my immediate thought when I hear this is in relative to what, right? And so when you think about the existing settlement system, the traditional settlement system, how do you possibly quantify the cost that's associated with that? And the cost isn't just the numeric energy expense of the existing system. There's a lot in there, like you were talking about Africa and how it was unbanked and all these other intangible costs that are associated with a system that is corruptible.
I think the people that say it costs too much are the 0.1% crypto promoters that are promoting their crypto token, their yo-yo coin, whatever. And they say it costs too much because they're desperately grasping for relevance. Okay. I think that the 98% of the world that doesn't really understand or think much about Bitcoin, they don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. They hear a little bit of barking from the crypto promoters and the, and the entrepreneurs. But from their point of view, they're not sure. Aqueducts cost a lot. Take away the aqueduct and everybody in the city dies. Sewers and reservoirs and dams. The Hoover Dam cost a lot. Power plants cost a lot. Railroads cost a lot. Railroads used to bankrupt everybody, right? Steel costs a lot. I mean, how many people have ever seen a steel refinery? Gunpowder is hard to make too, costs a lot. You study the history of the DuPonts, right? A couple of them got blown up in their own gunpowder factories. Yeah, too dangerous? Yeah, too dangerous? Not if you want to win the war, right? I mean, take away the steel, the oil, and the gunpowder, and then fight World War I and World War II again, right? Or take it out of the North. Right? It determines whether you win or whether you lose. Ships cost a lot. The Manhattan Project costs a lot. If you study what went into that, it must have been 500,000 people were working on all those projects to win, to basically drop two weapons. So I think you could say in general, every significant thing costs a lot. Look at the Brooklyn Bridge. Look at the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Look at the skyscraper in Manhattan. Look at Manhattan in general. Cost a lot. They all cost a lot. The Union Pacific Railroad costs a lot to connect the country. And they all have the same thing in common. There's a profound investment of capital and human intellect and labor in order to construct something with some degree of utility. And in this particular case, and when you look at it in that context, Bitcoin doesn't really cost that much at all. Bitcoin is probably there's $25-30 billion of hardware that's been purchased or capitalized in the network. They burn something like $3-5 billion a year worth of electricity to run it.
Mm-hmm.
They've kind of crossed over the point where the network is it's probably getting increasingly energy efficient. And so for the cost, say it's $10 billion a year to run the Bitcoin mining network, which is in essence the Bitcoin security network. For that cost, you're currently supporting $400 billion of assets, but it's like you spent $10 billion on a railroad that's worth $400 billion that moves, what is the number? It's billions and billions of dollars an hour of transactions, but it moves trillions and trillions, 10 trillion, 20 trillion a year or more, some large amount right now. But the network is almost infinitely scalable at this point. So the same $10 billion of hardware and energy expenditure per year, that could support 10x as many transactions or transaction value. It could support 10x the asset value. So it's like a railroad. The cost to create the railroad was high. The value of the railroad will scale dramatically by 10x and then by 100x and by 1000x. And ultimately, it's the price you pay for the civilization. If you're an aviator, the cost of building a 747, obscene. The cost of a first intercontinental jet, is $10-20 billion for the first plane. Mm-hmm. The next plane much cheaper, and you're amortizing. So by the time you've been flying a plane for 30 years, you've reduced the cost of going between New York and Tokyo down to some few $100s. Who would actually say it's too expensive? It would be the the guy that's selling the ox cart would say the railroad is too expensive.
Yes.
And the guy that's actually got the sailing yacht would say the steamship is too expensive. And the person that was pitching the automobile would say the subway is too expensive. And the dude that wants you to buy coal would say, the oil is too expensive. And the oil person would say the nuclear power is too expensive. And if I came up with a fusion reactor that ran off of a bottle of water that would light up the entire city for 100 years, the dudes in the nuclear industry would say, this is, strange and too expensive and dangerous or something, right? I mean, everybody always says that to prevent the next technology change. So I think that the solution clearly is educate those that are objective and explain to them why the civilization is based upon this monetary network. And the monetary network needs to be without an issuer, without dependence on a country or a company. It's ironic that it's companies that are paying money to lobbyists and academics and nonprofits to lobby against Bitcoin's energy use because they want you to rely upon their company and their company's token. And ultimately, that it's pretty obvious to anyone that thinks about it that we're not going to trust a private company to issue our money. And even if we did, even if it was the most perfect human being imaginable, they better be God and they better live for the next million years because we're not going to trust their kid or their kid's kid. Like name one person who's universally trusted by all 8 billion people on the planet in every nation state. Who would that be? The answer is nobody. Nobody can agree on trusting any political or commercial entity. But the one thing we can all agree on is on electricity and fire and steel. And in every one of those nations, in every one of those places, if you went and you said, who do you trust? They couldn't agree, but they'd probably all be using electricity. They trust Maxwell's equations, by the way. They trust Newtonian physics. And steel is wildly popular, even in communist regimes. Socialist regimes, communist regimes, fascist, leftist, rightist, everybody agrees they like steel. And if you go study civil engineering and you look at how difficult it is to build a building using masonry, stone blocks or wood, then someone comes along with steel, and steel is kind of like the solution to everybody's problem for the next 2,000 years. And it's such a good solution that all your problems go away. And it doesn't matter what your politics are. So I think that the most important point to make about Bitcoin is crypto steel. It's digital steel, and it has to be a commodity without an issuer. And if you're not going to be reliant on the efforts of others, Gensler uses this phrase a lot, efforts of others. It's the Howey test. Definition of investment contract is some people making an investment of money based upon the efforts of others. But forget about the idea of whether it's an investment contract or did you invest money. The point really is when you walk out on a steel bridge, you don't want to be relying upon the efforts of others halfway around the world to make the bridge not collapse. Right? So forgetting about, you don't have to be caught up in the debate over security versus commodity. The real question is, can you create digital material and digital energy? Can you create digital matter? If I want to create a bridge, I need to create it with a material that will not collapse depending upon the opinion of a politician or the opinion of a company. And I don't want to have to worry about a software engineer putting a bug in the code. Right? That's why I trust what? I trust a durable a steel that's been certified after I've seen it successful for 50 years or 100 years. Right? And that's why I wouldn't trust balsa wood. And that's why I wouldn't trust a software actuated bridge. When we break this rule, right, tragedy occurs. If you look at the Boeing 737 MAX debacle, the 737 is a totally safe plane, and it's probably one of the safest planes ever built. They engineered it in the 1970s, the 60s, and the 70s. Right, it's been flying that long. Why did it start falling out of the skies 50 years later? It's because some well-meaning engineer wanted to improve it. We can make it better. And so the way they made it better is they wrote software, that attempted to compensate for human error, right? Because the software engineers arrogantly thought that they were better than the pilots. And it's playing God is it's a pretty serious responsibility,
especially when
right?
you have 100 people on the plane, but you have the whole planet on the plane.
Good point. Yeah, I mean, what happened with the 737 is they over-engineered the software, and the software crashed the plane and killed everybody.
Yeah.
And if they hadn't done anything, right, the pilots would have done just fine. I think that's the argument in favor of simplicity, right? Keep it simple, stupid.
Yes.
And in mission critical systems, you see this a lot in the military. You see it when someone's life depends on something. Oftentimes, you would opt for the low-tech solution where you can verify it with your own eyes. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want a piece of software that runs a million lines of code that tells me, right, that the thing is stable. I want to test it myself, or I want to see it, right, that it's stable. But I think, to your point, the difference is, when software drives a car, the software may kill you. And when software flies an airplane, the software may kill 100 people or 500 people or 1,000. But when software runs the monetary network, may kill 1 billion. Actually, the truth is we got two problems, two extremes. One extreme, and maybe they're both the same. One extreme is central bankers running the monetary system, and every time they change something, they make it worse.
Yeah.
And we just saw that happen in Britain this week. Just chaos. $1 trillion changes hands, right? And the bankers say, "Oh well, we were busy trying to keep, a bunch of pension funds and institutions from losing from a massive loss of billions of dollars." What they don't say is we were busy keeping a bunch of rational investors on the other side of the trade from making billions of dollars.
Yes, amen.
Right. I mean, they took 100 billion from one group and gave it to another group that happened to be politically connected, and they masquerade as virtuously protecting the system from a meltdown. What they were doing was they were keeping the system from rationally correcting to a fair interest rate and rewarding rational thinkers that did the right thing, and they punished
and incentivizing future in the future for more people to pile into further risk.
Yeah, they create that moral hazard,
yes,
right?
Yes,
Punish the wise, reward the foolish, and create an insane world where the only way to get ahead is to act foolish. And if anybody ever fixes the world, everybody dies. So they turn the world upside down. And they did that manually. The danger with software-driven systems is you might inadvertently put, some piece of code in the system, meant to optimize for something, and it just goes catastrophically awry, and it crashes the entire system for everybody else. And this is it's a classic example of the phrase, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Mm-hmm. Right? The whole problem with most of these networks is they're continually chasing perfection, and they're willing to accept all sorts of ineffable, non-quantifiable risks that they don't understand.
Yes.
In order to pursue a tangible benefit they can see. So the fact that we managed to avoid a $50 billion loss by a pension fund is used as the justification to inflict $1 trillion of damage on everybody else that's not on the phone.
Mm-hmm. But
I'm not wise enough to necessarily conceptualize the $1 trillion of damage I'm doing. Or maybe I am, but it's just they're not screaming at me right now. So I'm going to take the expedient path.
Michael, when we talk about energy, everything that we've kind of talked to date or in this discussion has been a defensive response to what we hear all the time. What also drives me a little crazy is I get all these DMs from people showing me various charts of how they're using Bitcoin almost like a capacitor or a battery on the grid to strengthen the grid to make it more reliable. And the excess energy above whatever's being required off the grid is being immediately converted into stored energy, digital energy, and it's just making the grid more robust. You look at the flaring, the methane, and you look at how Bitcoin can be used in that capacity, and it's earth shattering the what this adds to the infrastructure for energy companies. Talk to us about, I guess, go on the offensive and explain to people that are listening how revolutionary this is for energy companies.
Yeah, I guess to that point, if all you do is write software, then the only thing you can ever do is improve virtual circumstances. So anything that's software only means you're creating a virtual machine to move imaginary tokens around to achieve an imaginary goal, to create imaginary happiness, and you'll never get out of that metaverse. You're kind of trapped in the metaverse. And if we were wired in cubicles getting fed by through a feeding tube or an IV, and we never moved and we lived in our brains, then maybe you would just focus on that metaverse. But that is literally like the Matrix. If, on the other hand, you want to improve things in the universe, if you have interest in solving problems in the universe, like clean water or healthy food or comfortable environment or providing people with physical luxury, then you have to build machines and you have to manipulate matter and energy. So the number one problem with all the non-energy based cryptos is they're all just software programs. And so you can write 100 million billion software programs. They're never going to feed you. And they're the only way that you're going to change the real universe is plug a piece of software into a machine. And so Bitcoin mining is really the digital energy business. And what you're doing is you've got a software protocol plugged into a machine. And the machine is converting electricity, intermittent electricity anywhere in the earth, powered by any energy source, into digital energy. And it's also creating security and integrity. So what you're getting is you're getting a block of digital energy, an asset that you can move around at the speed of light, friction-free, but you're also getting a block of digital energy, digital scarcity, digital money that will last forever. And so the entire network is therefore monetizing energy. And that means you've created a machine to convert waste energy into digital energy. That's really valuable for remediating methane or remediating stranded natural gas. It's also useful for monetizing stranded geothermal or stranded any other power. You're never going to monetize stranded power or waste power with a software only program, right? So all the proof of stake networks are irrelevant. They're not to solving an energy problem because they're not interfacing with energy. So the real value of Bitcoin to the energy business is I can monetize intermittent energy. I can monetize stranded energy. I can recycle wasted energy. I can create an economic sponsor to either develop an energy source where it would not be economically viable, right? So I've got a small stranded group of people that need energy, and I can't afford to build a plant to scale for them unless I pair a Bitcoin miner with their colony. So I can deliver energy to a place that needs it. And one example would be a small group of people that need it or a small business that needs it. Another example would be I need to run a generator on a methane flare, right? And it costs money to bring in the generator, right? Mm-hmm. So it costs money to to remediate the methane flaring, and I can't afford to do that if there's no customer for the electricity that I generate, or the pure energy I create. So Bitcoin allows you to pursue all sorts of these energy monetization strategies at different frequencies, at different scale, intermittently, and off of different sources. It also allows you to cross political jurisdictions. So, if you look at why Bitcoin mining is interesting, it would be interesting to any nation that wanted a hard currency export. So if I might do Bitcoin mining just to generate hard currency when I have no other natural buyer for my exports.
Yeah.
I might do Bitcoin mining to monetize stranded or waste energy because I have no customer. I might do Bitcoin mining because I have an interest in the security itself. And I might have capital that I just want to put into this, right? So if I have extra capital, I might do it because I have extra semiconductor capacity too. So there are a lot of motives for this, but in terms of environmental conservation, it seems to me to be the only technology that can monetize stranded or waste energy or remediate, environmental flaring at any scale, anywhere. I mean, most of the other ideas are kind of crippled ideas. You wouldn't be able to scale them up to be meaningful.
Michael, I have a friend that has sent me an article, kind of getting at some of the things that we've been talking about throughout the